Welcome to the NASM CPT podcast Facebook Live. We are going into some really interesting stuff, in my opinion, today. I found this interesting because it's not something that I was familiar with, but much like many of our intuitive trainers that have been working with clients for a very long time, as we start to talk about this topic today of motivational interviewing, you're going to see this and you're going to start going, man, this is stuff that I do a lot, or I do this all the time. And I love that. But what this is going to do, it's going to provide maybe a bit more purpose or a bit more understanding, or maybe even a system into doing something that you already do to help you refine that maybe a little bit more. And for those of you who don't know what motivational interviewing is, good for you. I have an incredibly intelligent guest that is with us today, and she and I have worked together for a while. We've actually spoken at a conference together and co-taught at a conference together. So I want to introduce you to my friend, Angie Miller. Angie, tell us about yourself. Say hi to everybody.
Hey, how you doing, Rick? I'm so glad to join you here today. I love Rick. I have utmost respect for Rick. I admire everything he does. So I was super excited to be on here today. So I am a psychotherapist. I work in mental health, and I also do a lot in health and fitness. So as Rick said, we've shared some space. We speak together at conferences, and we're both NASM master instructors. So I use this motivational interviewing stuff a lot. I use it in health and fitness, and I also use it in mental health.
That's great, and that's exactly what I want to talk about today, because there are things that you use this for in mental health that certainly is not anywhere close what we should do as fitness professionals, but there is some carryover between what you do and what we have the potential to do when it comes to motivational interviewing and things that are within our scope of practice as fitness professionals to really help people find their path, find their goals. They understand what their problems are. And we talked about this yesterday, is that as fitness professionals, we tend to want to solve everybody's problem. And motivational interviewing kind of puts a different twist on that. So can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, in mental health, I do a lot of solution-focused brief therapy, and they use motivational interviewing because it's really about meeting people where they are right now and then helping them to achieve their goals, helping them get where they want to go. So with motivational interviewing, you mentioned something that I love to talk about, and it's called the writing reflex. And the writing reflex is we have this urge to go in and fix things. We have an urge to go in and fix people because that's why we went into this profession. So I think of it as like when you're raising kids and your kid comes to you and they tell you about a problem, and your first instinct as a parent is, I want to fix this. I want to make this better. I want the tears to stop, or I want to help them through their pain. So it's that same thing when clients come to us, they tell us everything that's wrong, all the reasons why they can't lose weight or something that they want to change. And we want to get on our Superman cape and we want to get in there and we want to fix their problem for them.
I feel that is my role as a parent, that I do that and I want to do that and I want to fix it. And there's no doubt I've had clients like that where it just seems so obvious some things that they could change or what needs to be fixed. And I just want to fix it and I want to tell them the answers. And I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that many people know what they shouldn't be doing. And oftentimes many people know what they could and should be doing, but they're not ready. There's a chasm there that they're not ready to traverse for some reason. How does this help? Because clearly telling a smoker to stop smoking is not how this is going to work. Telling somebody who has a sweet tooth and is pre-diabetic and is not exercising, just saying the facts aren't necessarily going to be what helps them get up or put the food down or to get off the couch and do some more stuff. So kind of just talk me through the idea of it. And I'm asking this really for everybody, but I'm asking for myself as well, because I've somewhat familiar with the concepts, but not really. So this is an opportunity for me to kind of sit at your feet and to learn from you while we talk about this as well.
Okay, that's perfect. And I love that. And I always say that if I put myself between me and a person's problem, then I really just become the scapegoat. I become the person that gets blamed if things don't go well. And so you'll learn that when you're raising teenagers.
Yeah.
So with motivational interviewing, it's a collaborative approach. I'm a partner with my client. I'm not a director. I'm not a parent. I'm a friend, and I'm walking alongside of them. So I'm part of their journey, but in the spirit of I'm with you. I'm here to collaborate with you. I'm here to help you, because that way I'm strengthening their commitment to change. If I just tell somebody what to do, I'm not going to strengthen their commitment to change. I know that I shouldn't eat chocolate, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to eat chocolate every single day. So there's somewhere in there has to be some kind of impetus that helps me to wake up one morning and have this realization that chocolate doesn't serve me. And it's my job as a person who helps them through the motivational interviewing process to kind of help them see the light, but ultimately to give them their problem back and give them personal autonomy so that they can figure it out.
I dig that, really. I know that you talked about people not being ready for change, and I know Chaska and De Clementi's trans-theoretical model we talk about sometimes, and there's that pre-contemplation, contemplation, and there's different language to use depending on what level they are in their commitment to change. This seems to give some direction to that, and it's almost as if it doesn't matter where they are along that. It's still just being there as a guide to help them get there. And I'll say this, I've done some wellness coaching training, so I've taken courses. And one of the things about the coaching is that you're a guide for people. So you don't tell them what to do. You ask them what they're able to do, what they're capable of. I think motivational interviewing gives a bit more context around that. So I want to explore that just a little bit more. Yesterday, when we were talking, he kept bringing up this concept of something called Oars. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so it wasn't until I actually wrote multiple things down that I was like, oh, it's an acronym for something, and I wasn't sure what that was. So I want to get into a little bit of what Oars stands for, and then have you speak to just some of those concepts that are in it. And then, of course, as always, let's take this back to the personal trainers. And what does it mean in the context of a training session, and how we can support our clients as fitness pros?
Okay, perfect. So I think Oars, first of all, it's an acronym for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And open-ended questions they're a great way to get information from people. I think of open-ended questions like going fishing. I need to fish for information. And for some people, it's harder to get information extracted. So if I say to you, did you have a great day? That's a yes or no question. But if I say to you, tell me about your day, you're automatically invited into a conversation where we can talk about your day, and I can walk with you and kind of, not from a prescriptive stance, but kind of get some information from you that you might not otherwise have given me, because I opened the door for you to do that.
Yeah, I think about this sometimes as trying to play ping pong with somebody. You've got to be able to hit the ball back. Like I can't play with you if you're not hitting the ball back. And the problem is sometimes we don't provide good serves, right? We don't give them something that they can hit back to us. And that's really what an open-ended question is it allows somebody to provide more information besides this kind of binary concept of yes or no. So if we do these open-ended questions, it allows conversation to begin versus yes or no. And I've learned this, again, we go back to parenting, even something as how was your day at school today isn't very as powerful as tell me about your day at school. You know, there's something about how we deliver questions. Even sometimes open-ended questions have a tiering system of what is really supportive and what's not. So just going into kind of this idea of open-ended questions and how really to provide them or how they're utilized and what are some good ways that trainers can use them in a session.
I think that's a great question. So, and I think of open-ended questions, you use one of the words is how. So how could this be different, or how would you like things to be different? Or when was the time when you can remember that you were 5 pounds lighter? How did you feel then? Or what was your life like when you were 5 pounds lighter? What were some of the things that you were doing? What were some of the foods that you were eating or the exercises that you were engaging in? I even use if things could be different, what do you think they would look like?
Interesting. So how and if and when, kind of going back to some of those things as opposed to, what's going on today, right? Like just giving some direction to that conversation so that you can deliver a good serve and that they can bounce it back easily. I think that's pretty valuable. The open-ended questions I like a lot, and then it goes into the reflections, I believe. Now, when you say reflection, what does that even mean, and how can we support people with those?
Well, in the Oars acronym, so it's open-ended questions and then it's affirmations. And affirmations is more about just affirming people, affirming where they're at, affirming their values, affirming what's important to them. So we have these conceptualized ideas of how we think people should go about getting from A to B. But really, affirmations take in mind who they are and what their values are. And so we're affirming what's important to them, not what's important to us along that journey.
Okay, so this makes me think of, is this valuable? I guess that's why the A goes after the O, because this is what's really valuable. Somebody tells us something, and sometimes they will deliver, I was this, and it was a very positive experience, and now this, and it's a very negative experience. It's not something that is positive, and people get stuck. And it makes me think of Carol Dweck's book, where she talks about fixed mindset and growth mindset. And oftentimes people are stuck in a fixed mindset, and that's it's a tough place to grow from, especially if you're not ready to. Well, the language that's being used here, and we have to be careful when we put these questions out there. We ask a question, like you said, they answer that question, and they give kind of a negative and a positive connotation. Many times we'll look at that negative and say, oh, yes, this is what needs to change, versus going back and looking at that positive. So those affirmations are really important, that we don't look at what those negative things are that they're self-talking about, and we are focusing on the positive things. At least that's what I'm pulling from it. Please guide me with that and let me know where we are. But when this information comes out and you get these negatives and these positives, do you focus on any of the negative along with the positive, or you just kind of steer straight towards positive?
Well, I think that we always have to affirm. It kind of goes back to where people are. That's an excellent question, because we do have to affirm that everything is perception based, and this is their perception. But I always say in motivational interviewing, are you watering the problem plant, or are you watering the seeds of change? So in motivational interviewing, we're looking for solutions. We're focused on solutions. We're not focused on what's not working. So I want to hear your obstacles. I value your obstacles. I get that everyone has obstacles, but more importantly, I want to hear your strengths. I want to hear what makes you shine. I want to hear what makes you get your feet on the floor in the morning, because that's where I'm going to learn about your tenacity and your determination and the qualities that you have. They're going to help you overcome any obstacle.
Oh, that was so good. I love that. Are you watering the problem plant or the solution plant? And I love, love, love. Something about this, too, is that you mentioned roadblocks, and you have to create strategies to overcome the roadblocks. But I think sometimes we do focus too much on the roadblocks and not what the strengths are. So is there a way to correlate people's strengths with strategies to overcome these roadblocks and these barriers to our fitness related success?
Well, and I think that's kind of the whole process of motivational interviewing, is just strengthening that commitment to change so that clients can get through their goals. And that's how the Oars comes along, is asking them those open-ended questions, affirming where they're at, kind of doing some reflective listening. I hear you say, Rick, that you've been wanting to lose 5 pounds, but you can't join a gym and you work 10 hours a day, and really validating that these are true obstacles and empathizing with them and showing deep compassion, because remembering we're partnering, we're not judging, but then being able to go from there and sort of evoke from them, because evocation is one of the components of motivational interviewing. I want to evoke from you not just what's not working, but what is working, so that we can take it, even if it is a little seed, and we can grow it into a big plant.
Gotcha. So this reflection, which you've moved towards, is kind of hearing what they're saying, speaking it back in different contexts and different ways. And I know we talked about yesterday, there are a couple different ways to provide these reflections. There are simple versions of reflections, and they can get a little more complex. I'm not quite familiar with simple and complex. I'm sure that I'm probably good at simple because I guess I don't have context for what either of those mean. And then sometimes there are action reflections, I know. Could you just kind of go into what these reflections are? And again, like, as a fitness professional, how do we use it? And that's something also that we talked about, Angie, is that we wanted to have this idea of, what are the takeaways? What do people at the end of this 30-minute chat between the two of us, what are they stepping away with? And I know that you had some really wonderful things to add. So everything is about, yes, let me learn motivational interviewing and some of the ideas and what it means. And of course, you're not going to get the answers in this webcast, right? So the answers aren't going to make themselves most apparent, but what it can be doing is providing a new idea and a new concept that you can now go and have, there's another trough to feed from if you want to go and learn more information about this. And I tell people all the time, like when they do my workshops, I mentioned a partner-assisted stretching workshop where I'd say at the end of this, I'll do the stretch on somebody and you'll do the stretch on somebody. They'll feel mine and they won't feel yours. Don't feel bad about it, because the difference is I've been doing this for about 20 years and this is your first time doing this actual class and this kind of technique. And so too often people get presented with things and then they try it and they just go, oh, it doesn't work for me. And what it's not doing is it's not resonating and marinating. It's not being practiced enough. So as many applications we can get it back to our fitness friends to understand what are the applications of it and how does that get us down the road with things like these reflections that you were talking about and kind of different levels of reflection. So I know that was a bit overwhelming, but please take whatever you want from that diatribe and start.
I would listen to you all day, no worries. So I think, one of the takeaways would be that as trainers or as health and fitness professionals, we're not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. Everything you're doing is wrong. We're saying, or I think what motivational interviewing is saying, that we're so used to looking at what's wrong with people because that's what they come to us and they tell us. They sort of come to us with this big backpack of problems and all the reasons why they've never been able to solve them. And then they lay them out and it's kind of like here, fix me. And so, we've got our Superman cape on and we pick it up and we're like, okay, good. This is what I went to school for. This is what I do. But really, it's about kind of gently giving them back their backpack and reminding them that they have the autonomy to take care of their own concerns, so to speak. That we are not people to be fixed. We're just people who want to get better, and we need tools and we need assistance.
This is something that you've mentioned a couple of times, and I love all that. And you've mentioned the word collaboration or a collaborative effort. Can you speak to that a little bit, what it means versus, when somebody comes in and then we like to talk and say, this is how you are going to get all of these things kind of solved and laid out. What does a collaborative process look like?
I think the collaborative process is kind of what you and I have kind of said all along, where we're less prescriptive and we're more of a validating partner who's going to ultimately get them where they want to be. But the change process kind of has to go at their pace, Because they may work with us for 6 sessions or they may work with us for 60. But isn't the ultimate goal that however many sessions they work with us, their takeaway is that they have tools for life. Their takeaway is that they feel empowered, that they can make change happen no matter what's going on in their lives.
Oh, I love it. So doing, even if it's 1 session, 10 sessions, 30 sessions, 60, as you mentioned, to realize that what we're doing is we're providing tools for people. And I've mentioned this on the show before, is that when we decide that we're going to go to college, we don't go there just for the college experience. We go there for the skills and the learning and the education that college provides for us that we can apply for the rest of our lives. And when it comes to selling personal training or fitness sessions with or classes, that's really a lot of what it is. It's not just here's the money for the time that you spent with me, but it's here's money for the time and the tools and the education and the support that you can now, when we're done with the session or our 10-pack or whatever, you get to take that away with you and start creating some, as you mentioned, autonomy. And sometimes trainers are afraid for that because they don't want to lose the session. So they don't want to teach somebody how to fish. They want to keep selling fish at the market. But I think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck when you're allowing people to be more autonomous. And to be honest, let's take everything back to, as you mentioned, prescription, right? So we might look at the OPT model, and that's a very valuable model for us to use. And it's a great prescript, right? It's a script written out before anything has happened. And what we do is, if something doesn't work well for our clients, we move things around a little bit, but we can't do that unless we understand who they are and where they are and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And, sometimes we spend a lot of time focusing on what doesn't work instead of focusing on what does work. And I think that really is the home run in this conversation, is finding what is supportive for people and how we can empower them and help direct them from there.
And you asked about reflective listening, and I think that's perfect. That's a perfect tie-in, because really when we know that somebody hears us, then we feel validated. And when I feel validated by you, I will do anything for you, right? Because I start to recognize that you don't just see me, you feel me. And you understand, you walk into my world and I feel like we're sharing shoes together. And so now I'm like, this Rick guy, he really gets me. And so now I want to work with Rick because I know that Rick understands where I'm coming from. So those reflective those reflective responses might sound like something like, it sounds like you have felt so challenged over the years. Yeah. I hear that you feel like this has been such an arduous process. Right. And just people hearing you say those kinds of things, this is where it gets them.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's perfectly supportive and what needs to happen, I think, more within our industry. And you see some of the refinement happening. And here's what I love about fitness, right? So fitness people, there are people from all sorts of industries that end up coming into fitness. I don't think I've taught a single workshop in the last 10 years that hasn't had an attorney turned fitness professional, or maybe just moonlighting as a fitness professional that within a course, there's one in every course over the last few years, accountants, finance, but that it's not limited. It's not one direction, right? So we see that in fitness professionals too. And the ones that do tend to lean more towards that kind of empathetic understanding, you see them shift practice and become counselors and become, all of these wonderful things that they still hold tightly onto their fitness foundation, but they parlay that into additional resources and additional sources because they see where they can provide value. And it's kind of this insightful position that allows them to take hold of that and become excellent trainers, and some people to transition and moonlight still as trainers, but to dig a little bit deeper into the therapies because they see the value that it provides. So when it comes to that value, I just have a question. Which came first for you? Was it fitness or therapy?
kind of an interesting journey. It went full circle. It started out counseling, but it started out school counseling. I started out an educator, then went into school counseling, then went into fitness, then went into teaching stress management at a university, and then went back into mental health and stayed in fitness. And then I'm just kind of bringing it all together.
I love it. I love it. There's room for all of it.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So last night you and I were talking about that scaling ruler, that how we figure out if people are ready for change.
Yes,
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this was interesting to me because it's not how I would have asked that question or answered it, or I find it fascinating, and there's something really magical in the simplicity of this particular example and how it opens people up. So please, like talk us through on this kind of scale of 1 to 10, whatever the question is, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think you could stick to coming in 3 times a week and for an hour at the gym for the next 6 weeks or whatever? And they say to you, I don't know, like a 6, right? What does that look like in terms of the scaling?
So yeah, if you were to ask that question, or if somebody were to say, I want to lose 5 pounds, or whatever the question could be, you could input any question into it. And then I would ask them, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the least important, like it holds no value whatsoever, and 10 being just extremely important, like this really needs to happen 5 minutes ago. How important is it to you and you could input whatever it is, how important is it to you to lose weight? And I've seen this played out in workshops where we actually do it physically, where we actually make marks and we do each one on the ruler, and we have the person get up and they place themselves on the ruler wherever they are on their commitment to change. Because this is a pivotal question, because before we can go anywhere, we have to remember that we have to ask them, how committed are you to change? Just because they brought their backpack in and dumped it out for us doesn't mean they really are ready for change. It just means that they're ready for you to try to fix them. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how ready for you? And let's say you say 6. And my first question is, how come that number's not lower?
Yeah. And that's where I would be like, wait, what? What? Can you explain why asking why the number is not lower instead of why asking the number is not higher? This is interesting.
Because I want them to validate to me why they are where they are. It's like this subliminal way of getting them to recognize what got them to a 6 in the first place. Instead of that defeated kind of mentality of, well, how come you're not an 8? So it's kind of like if your kid brings home a B on a test and you look at them and they're all stoked, right? And you're like, well, how come you didn't get an A? And they're like, right? And if you would have said, how come you didn't get a D? They would have puffed up. Well, let me tell you, because, and they would tell you all the ways that they studied and the things that they did to get that B. And all of a sudden, you've just evoked from them all of their potential and all the things that made it amazing that allowed them to be a 6. And they're like, didn't realize that.
Interesting. So I love this because what you're doing is you're giving them the freedom to not present as perfectly as they think you want to hear them present.
Yes.
Right? And that's what a lot of people do. They'll do this with their trainers all the time. They will hyperextend something because they want to show you how far they can pull a weight back. And you're like, I don't want you to pull that weight back that far because it's causing your shoulders to do this. Or, they want to show us something that they can't do. And what we're allowing them to do by asking for a lesser number on that ruler is to not keep pushing them and to present themselves as more than where they are on that scale of change, on that ruler of change, but allowing them to take a step backward and to feel like, well, if I am here, I feel confident that I'm here and I can tell you why. And I think we undervalue small wins, and that's really what should be focused on, because so many people look at you mentioned it already. I want to lose 20 pounds, right? As people come in with that goal, I want to lose 20 pounds. When people would ask me, what did I want out of me growing my business? I would say to this, I didn't open my gyms in order to have one gym. I opened it because I expected it to grow, to have at least 6 gyms within a certain area. But I never talk about that because I'm never even going to get to the second gym unless the first one's successful. Yeah. So I need this win right now before I start looking at these big global things. And it doesn't mean you can't have long-term goals. Same thing with our weight loss. Even if they don't lose the weight, what steps are you taking to get there, and what have you won at just in the process? Because people don't focus on the process, they focus on the outcomes. And you don't get the outcomes without the process, and they need to be supported during that time so that they know they're going to get somewhere. And I think that this is such a unique and interesting approach to bring up.
Well, and I love that. I love everything you just said about that. And I tell you what, the next question after they tell me that, and I ask them, how come your number wasn't lower, and they've told me that, my next question is going to be, what would it take to get you to a higher number? So now I've given them their situation back, and I've asked them to process, to really think about emotionally, intellectually, what is it going to take for me to get to the next number? And this is where I'm going to hear stories from them. They're going to tell me about past experiences when they were able to be there. And we're going to be able to find some similarities or some commonalities from their a past history or some kind of future goal that they have that might help them to get to just the very next number. But you're right, it is all about small wins.
Yeah, I think that when people are pulling on their past history, they have options, right? Like, I know that it's going to be hard for me, that it's going to be difficult. I know I can't do it because I failed this time and this time and this time and this time. Or people will say, I know that I can do things because they have experience in being successful. So creating balance around what that looks like and giving them room to fail. There was a great story from Sarah Blakely, who's the founder of Spanx and the owner of Spanx. And she's a self-made billionaire, incredible woman. And apparently she got it from somewhere because she talks about her father and how her father would come in and around the dinner table, they'd go around the dinner table and he would say, I'd like for you, everybody just go around the dinner table and tell me, what did you fail at today? And what was interesting is that everybody wanted to create a story because they knew their dad was going to ask about that. And the great thing is that it's a win-win, because if you fail at something, you won because he's asking you what you failed at. But if you didn't fail, that means you actually succeeded at something that you tried. And I thought this is a fascinating story. I feel like this kind of rubric, this leveling the number system, if they're saying I'm here, you allow them space to fail or to backpedal or to not be as high as they're expected or they expect themselves to be, in your eyes at least. And then comes the push, the ask, what can it take? And the great thing is you didn't tell them. You ask them what it could take. And it's their responsibility to answer that question. Why is that valuable?
Yes. And I think that's a key point for all of us. It's just to remember to ask more questions. Questions are potential. It's all about giving people the opportunity to explore their own options. Yeah. And solution focused questions, right? So if somebody says to me, I want to lose 5 pounds, instead of saying, what do you have to take away? I'm going to ask them, what can you add to your life in order to lose 5 pounds?
Ooh, I like that. And I know a lot of us as trainers, we're out there going and, solving problems. As my grandfather used to say, Papa Daddy McCord, he would say, I like to be quiet. That way I know what I know and what you know. So, so he was a quiet man. And when somebody asked him why he was so quiet all the time, that was his response. And I think that trainers could learn a lot from that as well. People in general, and this is clearly not limited to the fitness world, that we want to solve people's problems. My daughter will come in with something going on at school, and I'll want to solve her problem. And And I can't. And that's really the answer. Like, I can't solve her problem. Like, that's for her. And for our clients, I can't solve your problem. I can provide some guidance. I can give some answers. It's not like people ask us questions and then we turn into the parable maker, where we certainly like tell a story, ask questions in return. We can answer questions, but we can ask more questions. So it's kind of like what you said. Not what do you take away? You don't take away your knowledge base and how you can support them in guidance. What you add to it is this kind of bevy of questions that allows us to get more from them and maybe allow them to answer their own questions. And I know the research on that shows that people are much more inclined to solve problems that they've already created an answer for than they are to try to solve a problem that you gave us the answer for. So that's kind of a good takeaway to move forward with that.
I think so. It's intrinsic motivation, right? Extrinsic motivation is built on what everybody tells us to do, but intrinsic motivation comes from within. And that's really what the whole spirit of motivational interviewing is how can I reach you and help you to realize what your potential is so that you feel intrinsically motivated to move forward. So that if I'm not here tomorrow, or for whatever reason something happens and we can't train together, like what's happening during COVID, if I can't train you online, I'm going to empower you with the tools that it takes to move forward.
Yeah. Can we talk just before, and Greg, I just want to ask you if there are any questions out there, but just a moment, I'm going to ask this question real quick. We've talked about a lot of wonderful things, but I think change talk is a valuable conversation to have. Is the change talk something that we try to direct people to, and how do we do that? Because, sometimes they're just negative Nellies out there. So how do we kind of support people and direct any of that change talk?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So there's change talk and sustain talk. And sustain talk just means I'm sort of stuck. I'm using language that supports that I'm not really ready to move the needle. I'm ready to hand you my problem, but I haven't really given you anything that says that I'm ready to do something toward change. So in order to shift sustain talk to change talk, I'm going to do things like the scaling ruler. I'm going to use things like the Oars principle. I'm going to ask them open-ended questions. I'm going to try to evoke some things from you that lead into that lead into change talk, that give me some nuggets that I can take, that I can kind of help support you so that you are ready for change. So it's really everything we just did. It's the Oars, it's the scaling questions, it's stuff like that. I just want to get you out of that position of being stuck into a position of moving toward change.
I love it. Yeah. That's an incredible summary of everything that we've talked about today. So thank you for putting that within a nutshell there. Greg, do we have any questions from people asking about motivational interviewing?
We do not today.
Okay. All right. Great.
You guys answered everything very well. So
that's what it was. Well, I want to then say thank you to Angie Miller. Thank you so much for being with us today and guiding us through this conversation and supporting us in this idea of motivational interviewing. I would love to find some more information about it. I'm sure some other people would be interested. What are ways that people could find out more about motivational interviewing?
There's so many great tools out there. There's so many great resources. There's a huge book by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick, and it's called Motivational Interviewing. And I know that there's one out there too that's geared specifically toward wellness professionals. But the MINT Society, the Motivational Interviewing, I'm blanking on what NT stands for, but there's a MINT Society, MINT, and they hold workshops, and I'm sure that they're doing so much virtually now. So there's so much work that's done in motivational interviewing. There's a ton of resources out there. And, I took a whole 8-hour workshop just on reflective listening. And I felt like I walked away a new person because I thought I was a good listener, but then I realized so many tools that I could use to get more out of people.
Oh, I love that. I love it. People breaking down the nuance of something and for you, even as a professional, to go and listen to somebody else on such a small topic. And, the Oars, the OARS, they're focusing on just the R, the reflective listening, and doing 8 hours on that. And you had so many takeaways from it. It's amazing when we get an opportunity to dive deep. I want to thank you for just giving us a 30,000-foot view of what motivational interviewing looks like. And if it whets the appetite of any of the fitness professionals out there, that they can look up some more information between this Rolnick and Miller and some of the other great content that's out there, then please take advantage of it and see what else is out there to help support you in this process. So, Angie, thank you very much. Greg, do we have any housekeeping things today that we need to cover? Oh, can't hear you.
You can actually head over to AFA's Facebook page later today, noon Pacific time. Angie's going to be hosting her own live show over there, talking about kind of the ins and outs of group fitness. So I will highly recommend you heading over there for more Angie.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Rick, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a big pleasure. All right.
Clearly, your book is full, so thank you for spending time with us today. My name is Rick Richey. This is the NASM CPT podcast and Facebook Live webcast.
All right. Thank you.